Welcome to a special edition of the Melee Stats podcast. This time, we're going to be previewing Galint Melee Open, the Spring Edition. Unfortunately, my co-host, Gimme That Week, couldn't make it tonight because he was feeling pretty sick. But as part of what we're doing for the show, I've actually brought a new co-host here today, a member of the Melee Stats Extended Universe, if you may. Thanks for joining me tonight, DarkGenex. How you doing?
Hello. I'm doing great. I'm just glad to be here. My first time on the podcast, so make it count.
Is it really? I feel like you've been on so many times before, like once or twice. Not even a deep dives?
Never. I've discussed things. I've talked pretty frequently in patron chat, Netflix discussion, bringing up results, but I've never been on one of the live or pre-recorded podcasts before.
Well, I can't think of an event I'm more excited to talk to you about than this upcoming one coming this weekend. I think just to kind of quickly jump into it, one of the things I'm most excited about for this weekend is actually that we're seeing a lot of returning names from the top 100 and from the start of 2020 returning this weekend after mostly quiet or inactive 2020s to compete. And I know you have a lot of matches picked out that you think are interesting to talk about, but why don't we get started with what your pick is for the potential upset to look out for in pools?
Potential upset to look out for in pools. All right. So I would say East Coast, Flinchy and Ginger. So Flinchy, Spacey extraordinaire. He plays pretty frequently with Beerman, NY Joey, that bunch of people. He is no stranger to the Falco matchup. He had that one run at Genesis. That was 2019 now. Wow. That was 2020.
Oh my god,
Yeah,
that felt like
2020.
forever ago. It feels like
Yeah.
5 years ago, so I don't blame you.
It was 14 months ago? Whatever. But so he beat Magi in the real thing and Kevbot, three pretty notable Spacey players, and he is really good at those matchups. If there was Falco style that Ginger has shown that he's somewhat struggled with in the past. I remember that he had a set with a Beerman, aka Lamb Chops, at a Frame Perfect where Beerman won 3-1. So I would say Ginger's still favored, but if there's an upset to look out for, I'd say probably look out for that.
I think Flinchy is especially one of those interesting players, in particular because of his region, Long Island, which is kind of notorious for just having endless amounts of talent. I think the typical Long Island thing is that a mid-level player just super breaks out and starts beating the former established top player in Long Island, and then they just disappear once they reach top 50 to 75 level. I mean, there's so many instances of this happening, like Animal, Darktooth. Obviously, Aklo and Foxy are kind of the Long Island associated people who broke out and became more well known over the last year and a half. But Flinchy, I actually thought in 2020 was one of those guys who, in the early part of net play, I was really a believer in because he was getting a ton of good results. He was streaming all the time. Ironically, when rollback kicked around, I didn't really see much of him, and when I say that, it's not that I don't think he did any worse. I just think he stopped going to as much. So I'm very excited to see how he shapes up, especially against someone like Ginger, who, again, as you established, I think Ginger is still the favorite because it is Ginger, but it's also a Falco Ditto, and it's also which is high volatility. I think if there's anyone early in terms of sleeper players to look out for and potential number one seed upsets, I really think you picked a good one with this.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, Flinchy hasn't really entered too much. It's not a case of a player not doing as well on rollback or a player who is not, I guess, too actively playing or anything like that. He's just a player who hasn't been entering tournaments. So he's still, I would say, on the top of his game. So look out for Flinchy.
You know what analogy I've always put for Long Island? I feel like they're the East Coast equivalent of San Diego. They just have you could by the end of 20 you could tell me now oh, I have a crystal ball at the end of 2021, Snoo as a top 100 resume, and I'd be like, yeah, that sounds about right, because that's just happened for each of their up and coming players just randomly get good. I'll never understand Long Island.
Chem?
Yeah, Chem too. I guess he technically counts, doesn't he?
He is Long Island.
Yeah. Why don't you walk us through maybe one or two more of those matches early on?
Sure. So East Coast, so Laud and H12 I think is going to be an interesting. So I think they're still playing, right? Yeah. So I don't believe they've played. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe they've played on rollback. the last time they played was at Pound 2019, I believe,
Yeah, I think that was
when
it.
H was still a Sheik main, and H actually won. So I'm not exactly sure how good H is against, I guess, Peaches, and Laud has been shown to be a strong, solid player fundamentally, doing great on net play. And also in real life. I just think this would be a good matchup to see. I would still favor Laud here, but I think that this could go either way.
Yeah, I think Lod is just so rock solid. You know, he's always my go-to if you ask me at any point, like, oh, how good is this player? Well, how would they do against Lod? Lod is always kind of like my benchmark go-to top 25 or so player in normal years. And I always bring this up whenever Lod comes up that in 2017 in an old episode of the Smash History podcast, the spiritual predecessor to the Melee Stats podcast. We were talking about Plups Luigi on an episode, right, and how it would do at a hypothetical event. And Wheat, who sadly couldn't be here tonight, would always bring up like, well, you know, maybe Plups Luigi could beat a few top spacies, but like, do you think Plups Luigi is going to beat Lod? Probably not, right? And this was before Lod had like really broken out, but was one of the better and one of the top players in MDVA. So I just think Lod is really difficult to upset, and it's funny that he's playing someone who had actually done that. So I will see how that goes. I think I would still go with Lod, but again, who knows, right? I think H2A is kind of like one of those. You know, they've been attending so much. If you watch any net play events over the last year, you're probably going to see them in a top 16 or top 8 somewhere. So I think another good call out that you had was the potential matchup of LSD versus Red. And I mentioned this
Yeah.
because initially I thought of Red as one of those people who wasn't active, but I actually looked a little bit at some of his results with you, and they were really solid, like at the end of 2020 for rollback events that he entered.
He hasn't he's still a solid player. He just hasn't been entering too much. He's kind of the same story as like a lot of the other somewhat inactive players. Like they're still solid fundamentally, and they got a decent amount of wins when they were entering. Like last year had wins on like Cobalt, Slug, JFlex, Dawson, uh, qualified for LACS 3, I'm pretty sure. Entered LACS 3. Also had wins on like Komodo, Kazim, a lot of like these names that have been showing up on net play events and doing super well. Red has always been like, I think you described it as, I don't remember the word for it, but you described Red as like someone who is like all eternally in the top 100, like fundamentally solid, super good punish, etc. And just never left that, I guess, skill tier of player, even after becoming inactive. And after he's come back, has shown that, yeah, I'm still a top 100 level player. Let me prove it.
Yeah, I think Red is one of those guys who like once you learn the sauce with enough times or with enough time spent in the game, it's not like you forget that stuff, right? It's very difficult to teach like other people like the kind of foundation you need to have to be solid. I'll never count out Red at any event he enters. I will say I think LSD is kind of a tough draw for him just because LSD, you know, if we were talking about players who have seen their stocks go up the most over the last year, obviously LSD is one of them. You know, Tech Chase Monster, Punch Game, Fiend, all that stuff. You know, endless resume of wins. But I want to see how he does, and I want to see how Red does against LSD, and I want to see how Red does in the rest of bracket because, as you mentioned, I think he does really. It's not like he just has a win over like an up and coming player. It's that in the last like quarter of a year or the last quarter to half of a year when he's entered events and played, you know, your Komodos, your Bzims, you know, you like these aren't like easy players to beat, but he's consistently beating him. So I want to see how he does in this event. I know he hasn't entered like a huge tournament in a long time, but you know that'll be really interesting. One of the matches one of the players that I wanted to point out that I wanted to hear your thoughts on is your fellow New Jerseyan, the Swooper. I haven't seen him
The
at an event in a
Swooper.
while.
He hasn't been entering too much recently. Just things come up. So funny you mention it. I don't think he's entered an event since LACS 3, where what is it? He's just been like busy with things. But I did play him recently. I think that he's still a strong Samus player. We haven't seen too much Samus honestly recently. Like I can't think of any active Samus players besides like, or at least on the
Hey,
East Coast, besides
don't do
like
my boy YCZ like that. He just
West
released a
Coast.
combo video.
He's been doing. Watch that combo video, by the way. If you haven't
Yeah, it's
seen it, it's
nasty.
so good. I'm talking like chat, I guess, and people watching. The video's amazing.
Yeah,
But
I would also mention Kata for additional Samus players.
yeah, he's also been doing super well. If you see a polarity SmackDown any given week, Kata will be like top 3, top 4, beating your favorite top 100 player whenever. But in terms of like East Coast Samuses, aside from I would say like pleasantries, we haven't really seen too much, I guess, Samus movement. More Squid Enders sometimes, but not too often. So the Swooper is someone I think we should definitely watch out for. Like he's got a Cobalt in his path, I'm pretty sure. Let me double check that. But regardless, I think that Cobalt's still favored in that matchup. Cobalt's pretty solid against Samus. But I think regardless of how this set goes, I would say Super someone to watch out for in this bracket.
Yeah, I think his all around matchup base was pretty solid the last time I remember him being very active. Like I don't think he's someone who would necessarily drown in a loser's bracket. I still remember his at the last like in-person major I went to in 2020 at Genesis 7. I remember him losing to Soccer Mom 69 early, and he went on this huge tear through losers. So I don't think he's someone who like after an early loss will will do necessarily worse in a stack bracket. I think he kind of gains momentum. The or I could just be saying projecting that off of one
No,
performance.
he's told me this. Like I've spoken with him, like we're both Jersey, we're friends and whatnot. And he said like a lot of the things that he does in majors to like get himself prepared is staying in like his zone. So he'll like grind melee and continue playing like after a loss until he's out of the tournament. And it's like he has to stay in that zone to play well. And because of that, he's very, very, I guess, like in tune with himself when he has to play for like these grueling, like endurance heavy, long losers runs.
Yeah.
And that's why he doesn't seem to lose steam.
I was gonna mention I just remembered his quarterly port losers run where he just fell short of beating Acidics in grands, but I think he reset bracket and in his losers run it's like the typical New Jersey thing, right? Like he lost early and then just beat a ton of like insanely I like to call them gray goo players where it's like they're all really good, but it's difficult to tell how good they are because they keep beating each other. So he beat like 9 or like 8 of them in a row to make it back to grands, which are like those are the kind of losers runs that nobody talks about. Where like you see the swooper beat someone who might not be top 100, and it's very easy to take it for granted until you realize how difficult it is to like beat all of them in a row. So I think that's I think he's a good player to point out too, especially for returning ones. I also want to mention one of the interesting matchups. I can't decide who I think is favored in here. I think Kuyashi Slox is a very interesting one because both those two players have not been too active in 2021. I know Slox won a recent Calvars Cup over Dr. Lobster and a ton of New England talent, which is pretty solid. Kuyashi, I don't think has been very active this year, but obviously they beat Hungrybox in 2020. In 2019, they kind of broke out a little more on the national scene with a ton of big wins. Very solid all around Marth player. I know Slox used to struggle against Marth earlier, when he was starting to get a lot better in his career. That at the beginning of 2020, I remember seeing a set of him versus Rishi where he actually beat Rishi like pretty thoroughly, and this was against someone who Rishi had his number for quite a while. So I want to see how Slox does, and I'm also curious to see how Kuyashi does, but I can't really pick between them.
So now that you bring it up, I'm checking SmashShadow.gg. First off, shout out to Hax's Nightclub. He did that at Hax's Nightclub, and he actually beat Rishi twice that tournament.
Yeah, twice. I remember the first set. I didn't remember the second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Slox, like you've said, has been like back and forth against Marth. I think Slox, like towards like earlier end of his career, he was a little bit like inconsistent, but I think he's like cleaned it up against Marth recently. But with that in mind, Slox hasn't been entering too much recently. I know he did a net play stream a couple of weeks back where he was like playing some solid players and best of fives and whatnot, probably to warm up. I think for Calvar Cup or Hax's Nightclub or something like that. Times are really weird nowadays, but I think that Slox is someone to look out for in the bracket. Like I think Kuyashi could take the set as well, don't get me wrong, but we haven't seen too much of Slox in like bigger tournaments on rollback, and like the ex New Englander in me wants to see Slox have a run at this tournament.
Yeah, and as a fellow New Englander, I'm gonna pick Slox for this, but I think this is just a really exciting one.
Hmm.
Um,
I
why
think
don't
if I
you
were a betting man, I'd go for Kuyashi, but we'll see.
Why don't you tell us your player to look out for this event? Because I think
Player
we'll
to look out for. What do you mean by that? Like, uh, winning the tournament, someone
no,
to look out for
yeah,
results wise.
yeah,
Like,
I guess let me clarify. What player do you think, given how they've performed lately, who do you think, might go under the radar as someone who could have a breakout tournament at Gallant?
okay, West Coast player, Daki. If you look at Daki's results over the last couple of months on roll, I mean, in real life, Daki was doing great too. But if you look at the last couple of months of Daki's results, like here or there, if you look at brackets in a vacuum, you see, oh, Daki beat Lucky, that's a really good win. Wow. Or wow, Daki beat Meds, that's a really good win. Wow. If you look at all of Daki's brackets, Daki's been beating like Lucky, Meds, Bobby, Smash Daddy, SDJ Azusa, like Logos, Koopa Troopa. The list goes on. YCZ. Um, Daki's been consistently performing and beating so many players in like the upper echelon of the West Coast. But I feel like Dak just got underlooked as a player who's been doing well, but not really, I guess, been receiving, I guess, the acclaim for the results just that he's been getting, you know? What do you
Yeah,
think?
so something that Wheat and I were talking about earlier in the week was that Daki apparently I don't know if this is still the case, but his parents didn't know that he would travel to like melee events because they don't approve of that kind of thing. So whenever he'd go to majors, he'd just like lie to them and give some like ridiculous excuse. Now this might be hearsay. I don't know. I don't know if Daki's parents are gonna find the stream somehow, but I think that's hilarious. And Daki's pretty young too. So it's very funny. Yeah, I mean, just looking at his bracket, Daki versus Poppy, I think that's a super interesting matchup because Poppy's been one of those just like consistent net play grinders where you could tell me any result of Poppy and I would believe you, but like overall he has trended very positive against players in his tier and beneath him, and he's gotten a lot of like really top wins too. One of my favorite recurring things was Poppy winning like 10 sets in a row over Bobby Big Balls, which I think is hilarious because like I used to people who weren't like in the know of the net play scene, I used to describe Poppy as like the new Bobby Big Balls but worse. But it's a very funny dynamic when the new Bobby Big Balls but worse beats Bobby Big Balls a lot. I do think Bobby, to his credit, snapped the streak and beat him at Ginger's pot of gold. But this is all to say that Daki versus Poppy I think will be the super sick matchup. And I
Absolutely.
totally agree with you. I think if you ask most people, they say like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. I guess Daki's top 25 in the West Coast." But if you like really look at his head-to-heads, this is a guy who like considering the consistency his wins come at and like how good he is against the field. Like I think he's a lot closer to your like Alberts, your Fat Gokus, like even Meds to an extent. Like I don't think he's that far off. Like I think he's within that tier and he's trending upward for sure. I think he's a great
Completely
pick.
agreed. I would say be sure to see where Daki ends up on the West Coast top 25, 50, 100 when it comes out on Monday Morning Marth.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even just going through some of this even going through some of the what's on the screen right now for like top 32 matches on the West Coast. I think that things like Azel versus Aura are very interesting. If Azel beats Aura, we get to see the SCL run back of Azel versus SFAT. I will say I don't know what character Azel is going, but he's one of those guys where like I think even if he plays Sheik, that's not maybe it's not the same caliber of opponent as his Fox or Falco, but like his Sheik did beat Quaff at their last tournament, so
Hmm.
it's not like this is a random secondary. It's still at the very least like one of the better players on the West Coast. Him
Yeah, for
versus.
sure.
Mhm. I wonder who would you take in an Azel SFAT run back if that happens.
I would probably. I mean, if it's Azul Sheik, if you know SFAT's his history against that character, I would probably take SFAT in that. But
Yeah, if it's a
uh,
Sheik, right?
yeah, but in the Ditto, I don't know.
Azel 3-0'd him last time, dude. It was
Yeah, though at the same time, like SFAT on like at least recently, he's been doing like super well at all these events, like really consistent and whatnot. I don't know. I mean, we also haven't seen Azul's Fox in a while. either. So
Yeah, and
it's hard
his
to
Fox
say.
did 3-0 SFAT, so I see no
Yeah.
reason why he'd want to go another character. SFAT actually, like, I feel like he just had the most under the radar January, where he finished second at I think the previous Galint Open, and he won another really big event. Like I high key thought that the name is slipping my mind right now, so I look really bad. But
He
the
beat oh
turn
Frame Perfect 4.
Yeah, Frame Perfect series Online 4. I thought that was high key like one of the most impressive victories of SFAT's career.
Hacks
And
twice, Aklo, Forest. I don't remember what character Zane went, but Panda and Dawson as well. Like
I think he beat Zane's Roy,
Zane's don't touch it.
yeah, but I'm never gonna sleep on it. It's Zane's Roy, dude. Like,
It's kind of crazy if you look at this Frame Perfect 4. Like he played like only good opponents.
yeah, and he beat all of them. It's crazy. It's such a sick run, and nobody talked about it because it's SFAT. Like, come on. How can you take this thing for granted?
And then right before that at Gallant, he beat like Hacks, Lod, Gatsu, Connor, and then only lost to HBox twice, which granted was game 5.
Yeah. I just think he's someone who I think has an outside shot of winning this event. But if you told that to someone, they might not like believe it until you like explain it to them, right? It's so
Yeah.
weird that like SFAT's one of those guys who's just like perennially underrated because he's always like consistently good. So we just take it for granted, and I feel like that's not like people just constantly sleep on SFAT.
It's like people want to see the wild upsets and the underdog stories and whatnot. It's like the super consistent player who normally places their seed. It's like not in the same storyline. People kind of want to see other things.
Yeah,
But SFAT's
relative.
been really good.
Yeah, another Fox player, greatest transition of all time, who people have wanted to see do well and who had a great 2020 was Sunsei, who will also be having a summit, I believe a summit rematch with Axe if
Hmm.
things go as projected and as this bracket is going. I don't know who I would have in that. I mean, Sunsei, like for people who don't know and have been living under a rock for 2020, Sunsei is a Canadian Fox, Alberta and Ontario, one of the like one of the top one of the players who's gotten uh God, I'm losing track of my sentences here. He's one of
You're
the
good.
players who I think has like gone from the bottom end of like top 100 level to like suddenly top 20 over the last year. The first really big performance of his that caught my eye was when he won one of the early editions of Hax's Nightclub over Rishi, and then in January of last year, before rollback, he actually won a tournament over Moki and Nunn. And since then, I mean, now we all know who he is. Just like his resume is endless. He's always like when he enters TMT, he makes top eights. He's just like a very all around solid player. And I believe he actually beat Axe the last time they played,
At
right?
Smash Summit 10, yeah.
Yeah. We haven't seen much of Axe in 2021, come to think of it.
Not really. He entered LACS 3, Gallant Melee Open, I think a TMT, couple Rollback Rumbles. He's been doing a couple events, but I know I think he broke his hand or like wrist or something like that.
Mm. Yeah, he's gone
Definitely
like
saw
Young
him.
Link. He's gone Young Link. I know he's entered a few events as Ice Climbers also.
Oh, are you talking about Axe or Sunsei?
Axe.
Okay, I was talking about Sunsei because I was like,
Oh,
Axe
okay.
definitely did not
My
break his
bad.
hand. But what is it? Axe hasn't been entering too much, like you said. But I know it sounds really strange saying this in like with 2020 in mind, but like I feel Axe has an off chance to like win the event. If you look at his bracket, it's like I remember we like had a slight disagreement on this when we were talking before the stream. But if you look at his
Right.
bracket, it's like Sunsei, it's like almost all spacies. It's like or it is all space, I'm pretty sure. It's Sunsei into Moki into potentially SFAT into IBW or S2J. And assuming that all goes to plan, I feel like Axe could just like win all that and win the tournament from winners, you know?
I need to see how he does in the first two sets. I feel like again, maybe this is just projecting like a narrative over something that's not true, but I feel like that's actually kind of scary because these are all opponents that, again, like this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Super. It's like if you took it strictly as a head-to-head case, like as individual sets, yeah, maybe Axe would be favored over many of those players, but I think there's a high enough upset potential in many of them, or a high enough loss potential in each of them where consecutively winning each of these sets for Axe, I think would be really difficult. And I guess this is like a gameplay thing, but even just like as Pikachu versus Fox, like you mentioned beating Sunsei, like Sunsei is someone who might be top 15 to like top 20 in the world. So like
For
going
sure.
from beating him before top 16 of an entire event into like having to play Moki, who's had an incredible 2021. I'll get into this later. Into like playing SFAT and then IBDW. That's a I know Axe is great. I'll never Axe always has slumps in his careers that he responds pretty well to, or he comes back with a big event that reminds everyone that this is Axe. But I think that beating Sunsei, SFAT, Moki, and IBDW, or any other combination of top players that at this steep of an event in a row is a really tall order for like anyone, let alone someone who hasn't entered much in 2021, even if it is Axe.
For sure. I would say I don't think we can ever count Axe out, but with
Right.
this in mind, it is not an easy bracket by any means. But it's like I feel like if there's someone who can do it, it would be him.
Yeah, I mean, like if he 3-0s Sunsei if they play in the first set and like looks amazing, then I feel like again, like similar to what we were talking about with Swooper, like he could just get in the zone and just do whatever Pikachu does. Like I don't know, like up air, out of shield, Fox by a corner of the stage, back throw, or whatever. Like you can never discount Axe. That dude's wacko when he's good.
Speaking of Axe, just this is like completely, I guess, not like a win the tournament kind of thing. You should watch out for this set. I think Axe is gonna win, but I feel like this is gonna be a very entertaining set. Axe versus Gumi.
Yeah, that's a good call out. I feel like yeah, again, I feel like there'll be a lot of Twitch clips for this matchup. Maybe different characters from Axe if he takes like a game one lead. Maybe we get to see Young Link versus Samus if that's your kind of thing. Wacky sets. Axe
Goofy
versus Gumi.
Melee, this is your set.
Yeah, I
Speaking
guess
of
that.
pools West Coast, since we've only talked about pools in the East Coast, are there any pools in the West Coast, like matches that you would want to call out or talk about?
Yeah, why don't we talk about Alp versus Justice? Justice is
Sure.
one of those guys who I feel like he enters so much, and like he's been really one of the like top grinder foxes over the last like 6 months or so. I know he has a recent win on Toussaint. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I I actually got introduced to him through watching him play on Hungrybox's stream. I didn't realize who he was, and then I learned it was GP who had known from before. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he's just been like really solid. Usually a lock for like top 32 to 48 at any like notable net play event he enters. Alpa's another player from Texas, I think, right? Like another Fox
Yep.
player. So,
Mm-hmm.
but we haven't really seen that much of him in 2021, at least. Not
Yeah,
as
I
much
know
as with
that.
Justice.
Yeah, I know that Alp has entered a couple of tournaments. Like, I think he beat Bobby Big Balls at. I don't know if it was actually. I think he beat Bobby Big Balls at Levo. I want to say. He's got like wins on like Poppy and Curve and whatnot this year. But
Okay,
Justice has been entering.
I will say those are good set wins. Those are good players. But it's funny because those three enter so much. So it's like I'm imagining like any outside shot player, like any like very solid player, like might look at us like gassing up Alp and being like, "Well, I beat Bobby Big Balls and Pappy too." And it's like okay, but they enter a lot, right? Like it's just funny that those three came to mind, like three of the most active players.
Mm-hmm. I mean, activity aside, they're still very good players and also
Yeah, of
like solid
course.
wins. So. And then
Yeah.
Justice, I mean, Justice, if you want to talk active players, he's entered like everything. Went on two Saint recently, a couple of others.
Yeah, I think he made top 8 at the Black Excellent Invitational. One of his sets was a DQ, but he did pretty well for himself there.
Hmm. He also since then has beaten like I know he beat Lag recently, Azusa, I think there were a few. I think Stiff, but just overall, he's like pretty consistent. Beats a lot of players in his tier, punches up a lot of the time, and doesn't normally drop sets to players who are like particularly worse than him. So, regardless of how this set goes, of the Alpha Justice set, like I think both are good players to look out for in this tournament and expect them to see. I guess like expect to see them do well.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty safe bet. Why don't we go into like top 16 then? Because I think we have a lot of potentially interesting matches.
Yeah.
The
So, second, I pulled that up. This set, I'm really looking forward to this. So if I'm not mistaken, S2J and HBox have not played on back.
That's so crazy to think about. I felt like there was an era where SJ and HBox would just play in like winners quarters of smaller majors, and HBox would just like 3-0 him. Like maybe we get a 3-1, maybe even a 3-2 every now and then. But if that like in the old days of in-person Melee, this is one of those. I'm sorry, SJ fans. This is one of those times where like if I was attending a major and I saw Hungrybox versus SJ, like I would get up and start playing friendlies.
Oh,
But it's not SJ's fault. I feel like HBox just has like there are certain kinds of players where you just know Hungrybox is gonna win, and like for a long time SJ is one of them. But I will say, in terms of like their recent trajectories, SJ, like this dude's like almost a weekly guaranteed rollback Rumble champion. He dominates like Super Smash Sundays. I think if there's a West Coast player who just I have more faith in making their invitational like the final invitational of the Smash World Tour or whatever, if there's a player that like I literally cannot envision a future in which he doesn't make it, it's S2J. I would honestly
mhm.
like I only mentioned him above Mango because Mango's only like serious event he entered was one that he sandbagged in. And S2J has just like literally gone to so much and wins a tournament every week. I would if S2J didn't make his like invitational spot, barring a medical emergency or whatever, I would literally quit Melee and I would start like playing Smash Ultimate. I cannot imagine someone who has like literally earned a potential spot or is on track to earning it. Like he is a guarantee. So it's
He's
very funny. So it's very funny when I say that SJ and Hungrybox that I'm pretty sure that if they play, Hungrybox will win because Hungrybox has had the opposite trajectory, right? Like obviously
yeah.
getting much worse in 2020 and
I mean, he still will qualify. I'm pretty sure he'll still qualify, but it's like if you look at their
yeah, I
trajectories,
think
it's
he'll
like
qualify.
HBox has been like losing sets to other players, been focusing a lot on Ultimate, making the waves on Twitter every other week with his pop offs, etc. Whereas like it seems like
You've been the
SJ has been like
recipient of one actually, or you were on the receiving
I
end of
I
one.
do remember being popped off on by HBox a pound online. I want to say,
I think it was a
yeah,
2-0 also. Like I don't
it
know
was a
what he
2-0.
was
Yeah,
popping
it,
off.
it was
What
it
was he
wasn't close
popping off
either.
on the 2?
I don't know. So I'm looking at this. Sorry to transition really quickly. I'm looking at this top 16. We didn't even bring this up. Have Kodorin and IBW ever played?
I don't think so in rollback.
So it's like IBW, the self-proclaimed like master of the Marth matchup is Fox. He's like one of the only Foxes who I guess like nowadays openly talks about the matchup being possible anymore. At least out of like the top level Foxes, at least from what I've seen. And Kodorin, West Coast Spacey Slayer, have been doing super well as well. Um, I don't think I've ever seen them play. If they've ever played, I don't recall it happening. But I think that if this set goes to projection, it'll be a good one to watch.
Yeah, Kodorin had obviously an incredible February Melee Stats Player of the Month. And again, full disclaimer, I take mini lessons from Kodorin. So
Oh.
I'm a little biased here, but I have a lot of faith in Kodorin to pull these out. And I will say if there's a time for him to beat IBW, I think it's now when IBW, he won a garbage connection, I believe, earlier in the year over SJ or a West Coast Net Play event, but he
Mhm.
hasn't actually entered very much because he's been taking some time away from seriously competing. So I don't know how he'll do at his first event back. And Kodorin's again one of those players whose performance has really taken a jump up over the last quarter of a year or
He
so.
just won Pot of Gold.
Yeah, he won pot of gold. He added Toussaint and Zamu to his long list of just victories he's taken over players this year. And I mean, as we were
Also
mentioning
Magi and Bobby twice.
yeah, I mean, as we were mentioning before, it's not just about like your peak win, right? It's how often they come and how well you do against those players. And it's
And
like
you see
it,
Kodorin every week at training mode at the tournament that he runs, by the way, training mode tournaments, just beating like everyone.
yeah. So I'm really excited to see how this goes. Not only because again, bias, I'm rooting for Kodorin and I want to see him do well, but I am genuinely curious how IBW will look at his first like big major back. One thing
Mm.
I'll mention I wonder if IBW will go Fox the whole set. Lately, I know he's been practicing. He's been trying out Marth on FD in friendly sessions with LSD. I know he's tried Sheik also. So I wonder if we'll see like possible character counter picks from him heading into the set. If I were to guess, I would assume that IBW will just play Fox throughout. But again, he's just like a rot. Like you can never count. Like if he brings out his Martha Sheik, I wouldn't see it as like a spur of the moment thing. I think I like he has been working
Methodical,
on it.
calculated, like he has been working on it, like you said. It's
Yeah.
also like, just to point out, IBW is like I would say like relatively heavy favorite for this tournament.
Yeah, I mean it's I would agree. I don't think there's I think his overall matchup spread is so solid. It's very difficult for me to Kodorin has a good chance, but it's very difficult for me to see his chances relative to the other field and not see him as a solid favorite to win the event.
Yeah.
Just because it's IBDW, I know he hasn't entered much in 2021.
But like
So
his
that
2020 was just like spectacular.
yeah, absolutely.
And he plays like, even if he hasn't been entering, like if you go on twitch.tv, IBW at any point, like pretty much any point of the day, you'll see him like grinding out Melee. Like it's not like he's not playing the game or taking a break. He is still very actively playing and practicing.
Yeah, I'll say if IBW beats Kadoran, he'll play the winner of S2J and Hungrybox, which for the sake of this show, I'm gonna assume it's Hungrybox, but I think he's still favored against both players either way.
Yeah.
I know he and S2J traded sets earlier in the year, but IBW is one of like I won't ever fully count out Hungrybox against anyone, but I think IBW is like possibly one of the worst opponents he could like if Hungrybox makes it that deep into bracket. I think he's one of the worst. IBW is one of the worst opponents that Hungrybox could run into in winter semifinals. It's kind of a
Yeah.
rough draw for him.
I think we saw glimpses of like old HBox at like Four Loco Fight Night, if you recall that crazy Zane set.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't be surprised if HBox is like makes it really deep in this bracket, or dare I say it, even wins.
I will say that Hungrybox Zane set was very exciting. I totally empathize with anyone who watched it and felt excited to see a close set between the best player in the world and a former number one who's been slumping. But watching that set, as like a Marth player who's like trying to study it afterward, I will say Hungrybox did a lot of stuff that was just like kind of random. Like he would aerial outside of like where Zane could hit him with like forward air or something, but then just like immediately spot dodge upon landing, and then Zane would just like be really confused and not know what to do. Like I didn't think it was necessarily like a high level melee set like some of their past in person sets. I just thought it was like a very random kind of like wacky set. I don't think that would happen if they played again. And I have to imagine if Hungrybox beats SGJ and plays IBDW, I would still have IBDW as a very heavy favorite.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
SFAT and Moki, the other matchup here, I think is really interesting to talk about because just as we were talking about like, or at least how I brought up that SFAT had a great January and no one cared. I will say for someone so electrifying like Moki, a very popular player, he's got his Twitter combos and everything, a big stream. I will say Moki's 2021. I feel like if you ask most people to place Moki somewhere, they'd be like, oh yeah, he's top 15 or top 20. But like if you actually look at the impressiveness of some of his accomplishments in 2021, I mean it's really outstanding. Not only did he beat
Wizrobe, 2 wins on Ginger,
Jmook.
Oh,
Yeah,
3 wins on Ginger. Sorry.
Like the thing is like we talked about consistency of wins before, and we talked about like quality of wins. But I want to mention two things with Moki. He actually won 2 like very good events. He won a Hax's nightclub, beating Ginger twice, beating Polish, Joyboy, Bones, and then he won Xanadu, beating Bobby Big Balls, Ginger, and Dreffin. And obviously his 4th place at Four Loco Fight Night was great too, but like winning 2 very stacked net play tournaments is something that like Moki just did that no one like I feel like the magnitude of those 2 accomplishments relative to like people that you might envision as Moki's peers is just kind of like absurd.
Yeah, a lot of the time, like you said, a lot of the time people think of Moki as like the super crazy Twitter clip guy, fun stream, whatnot, and everyone knows he's really good. Like you ask anyone, I guess, playing Melee, where do you think Moki is right now? Oh, he's definitely top 15. Look at the results. Like, wait a second. He's
Yeah,
like top 10.
yeah. It's like wait, Moki won tournaments over Ginger. That's crazy. Like you should never
Twice.
Yeah, it's not like the first time was a fluke or whatever, you know. Like he actually came back, won again, and of course he beat J-Mook, which for us is like, you know, considering J-Mook is like the new top dog on the block, or whatever, like that shouldn't be slept on.
Mm-hmm.
So who do you think is gonna
Mogi's
win
one to
the
look
event?
out for.
Who do you
Who do
think is
I
gonna
think
win
is
the
going to win
event?
the event? I mean, like we said before, IBW is the definite favorite. If I were to have to put money on it, I would probably say IBW. But I think, and this might be crazy, I think I'm a believer in like a deep H box or a deep Axe run
Well, okay,
for
well,
2020.
you talked a little bit about the Axe one, and I could see a future in which that happens if he starts off hot and keeps it rolling. Convince
Hmm.
me on the H box winning this tournament train, because
Okay,
I'm gonna put on my just my obnoxious sports analyst hat and hot take
sports
hat
analyst hat,
and
right?
say, yeah, I'm gonna say that it's not happening. You gotta sell me on this.
Okay, so we're gonna look at H box's path, right? So I think I mean, all of this, like the Scherzo,
All right,
Cobalt, none.
that's already scary.
It's
I've seen enough Scherzo versus Jigglypuff sets. That's already a terrifying draw for
he
HBox.
recycles Michael, but I think that's the name of that event.
Yeah.
The one of their
Mhm.
gauntlets. Yeah. Um. Thank you. But what is it? Uh,
Cobalt
assuming
scary
he makes it through,
again.
these are all scary sets. He could definitely lose all these sets. He could also win all of these sets. If he makes it through all of this, he makes it through SUJ, right? If he does this as intended, right? SUJ here would become H-Box. If Axe takes out Ginger here, this is H-Box Axe, which I'm pretty sure that H-Box would still win. And then other side of the bracket, he's like pretty heavily positive on SFAT.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, rollback wise, at least I'm pretty sure he's never lost to SFAT. And I think he could also beat Moki, right? And he's already in top 3 from there. Like, it's like he
Okay, so
could lose.
maybe top three. I could see a HBox victory or top three run. I can't see him winning the event. I think it's a lot to like. We looked at some of his East Coast top 32 matches. I'm already seeing terrifying names like LSD and Nunn in his bracket alongside Cobalt. And who does Cobalt have to play before? He has to play the Swooper, right?
Yeah,
You know, okay. I think you know. I know the Swooper has a lot of Jigglypuff experience. I'm still gonna
I
give it to
don't.
slightly HBox for that, but
Yeah, I don't
well,
think
not
Swooper would
slightly.
beat
I think
H-Box.
still
I
like
think H-Box heavily favored against the Swooper, as much out of his
okay. Yeah,
practice
actually,
as
what am I
Swooper
talking
has.
about? And sorry, Swooper, but Hungrybox is Hungrybox. I'll trust him in that. But like even LSD, none like that's scary, man. Like how like those. I don't even know if Hungrybox is like necessarily favored over none at this point. Actually, I don't know. Maybe I'm being too much of a hater, but I'm gonna play it up. Yeah, I don't think I think none is terrifying for him. Uh, it, I wonder though, like if I were to envision this reality in which Hungrybox wins this event, maybe Kadoran beats IBDW. Maybe maybe Kadoran beats IBDW. Maybe he gets Hungrybox Kadoran. I know he 3-0'd him the last set. Maybe Kadoran does better, but I would still favor Hungrybox in that. Maybe he runs
Hmm.
into SFAT. Maybe he runs into SFAT and winners, and then he beats him again in grands. Is that? Would you say that's his chance?
I think if H-Box is going to win this tournament, it's going to be through a loser's run. I know that sounds like so strange to believe in
Dude, I think you're
2021,
crazy. I don't think
but
that's gonna happen.
we'll see. We'll see. What do you
Now,
think?
there is one quick thing though. Where is Laud in this bracket? We
Law.
Hungrybox needs to stay far away from Laud.
So I'm pretty sure he's playing Zamu in winners top 32, which I honestly think can go either way. Zamu is
Yeah,
shown to
that's
be pretty proficient at the Peach match.
that's a very tough draw for Laud.
He had the one tournament last year. Was it this year or 2 years ago at this point?
Are you talking about the one he won over Triff?
Triff,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was like two
And
years
then
ago.
dang. And he also he 3-0'd Ryobeat at the Saturday Night Levo
Yeah.
like last week. And he also had that really good pot of gold run beating SFAT, what is it, Magi, Rocky, etc. A Fat Goku as well. So Zamu stock's pretty high as well. So he Lon is he could make it here. But does he even play HBox if he makes it through this part? He doesn't.
He has to make Zamu has to make it through IBDW.
Yeah,
Which
so Ace Prox
Zamu
is far from
beat
lost.
SFAT.
He
He's
did. He did.
incredible with the Fox Ditto, so I'll never discount anything from him.
Hmm. Zed is another player. I don't think we've talked about him very much, but he's been on hot streak recently, and I think he'll do really well this tournament too.
Yeah, he wasn't around for a lot of 2020, but lately he's really impressed me. Even before his Ginger's pot of gold, like he came back and beat Zuppy pretty solidly, and Zuppy's been one of those people who also have like really quickly gotten a lot better. I know
Yeah,
Zuppy's won like a ton of like pretty solid weeklies
his
lately.
2021's been really good.
Hmm.
But I do want to mention about Zamu because I don't think we brought this up during our pools thing because I might as well bring it up now. He has Reeve for top
That's
32
fun little
winners,
run
and it
back.
is worth referencing that he did lose 0-2 to Reeve in 4 local fight night pretty recently as well. So I think Reeve could like Reeve is a player who like before rollback started, he was like doing super well, beating
Yeah,
like pretty
net
much
play
everyone. Yeah, like
like
he
old
was
rollback
kind of
or
he was
before
kind
rollback.
of
Yeah.
on the trajectory that LSD was at like during the middle of rollback, or like it's the middle beginning of rollback. Whereas like Reeve was like, oh, he's gonna be top 100 when events come back. He was like beating everyone, and then kind of like disappeared. But it seems like he's back. So I kind of see how Reeve does at this tournament.
I think historically Reeve might be the best like not counting old school melee. I think
Hmm.
Reeve might be the best player to never make top 100.
He's good. I'll
Like he's
always
always
have
been on the
a.
cusp, like
I think I'll
close.
always have a spot on my heart for maybe Shaz Kilmer. But I think Reeve is definitely one of like the best players who has never been top 100, and it would be very surprised to me if he did not make top 100 like ever. Like I'm pretty sure he'll make it when events come back.
Okay, so just to clarify, I guess before we end up the preview and go into maybe a bit of viewer Q&A in the chat, who's your pick for winning the event? Like, let's say without putting money on it. I think we both agree that IBDW is probably like logically the favorite, but pick
Yeah,
one. Are you still gonna go with IBDW or are you gonna go with Axe or Hungry Box's run?
I think I would go with IBW. I think he's just got such a lock on a lot of the players in this bracket. Consistently did great in 2020. First seed, can't really go wrong with IBW.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with Moki. I'm gonna say he wins his
Hmm.
third really big event of 2021, and people finally start like noticing him as like definitively top 10, or at least well within the tier of being able to take net play events, or at least maybe ones like maybe a dark horse to take them.
Hmm. For sure, it'll be a good event to watch. So be sure to watch if you're
Yeah,
not competing, and if you
tomorrow
are
and
competing,
Sunday.
yeah,
All right, why don't we get into some of the questions in the chat and see if there's anything we can find. We got about like 10 more minutes.
sure. Oh, look, I have a 30-month sub. Let me just launch that.
Nice.
All right.
It feels kind of crazy. Like March has been a lot bigger for events than I imagined. Like heading into the year,
Mm-hmm.
like especially with the world tour coming back. I think there's like an incentive for a lot of formerly inactive people to start competing again.
Yeah, it felt like I like the first couple of weeks of January there was so much. Like there was the first Galint Melee, there was a Pax nightclub, there were like a couple of other events, and then it felt like there wasn't anything super big. There was the first big Xanadu, and then there was a I Dare You, and then it felt like there wasn't anything. Forgive me if I'm incorrect. It didn't feel like there was anything like super big in like late January and February. It kind of felt like sort of like an off season, and that a lot of the top players weren't really competing in things. And then it kind of just like got brought back around like early March with like LG Junior's Pot of Gold, uh, for local fight night, this, etc. And
Do
I feel like there's a lot of good melee to watch right now.
Do you remember like the end of 2017 or so, or like around that era when Pat's House 3 came out and like there were a ton of events where like the top 9 seeds anyone could win with the right bracket.
Yeah.
Cuz like
Hmm.
you kind of had like a massive RPS situation where like like SFAT would beat someone, but then like that person would lose to Lod, but then that person would lose to like Duck
Was
or
that with
something.
like Pat's House and like Holiday Bash and that era, or am I like mixing timelines?
I think Holiday Bash was late 2016, or maybe it was 2017. Either way, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like your events to not feature necessarily like the top players, but a ton of like incredible talent just beneath that. I feel like we've seen a ton of that on net play.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I guess that
All
the
right.
first fun question, or one of the first questions I saw from the chat came from Sika. I don't know if this
Okay.
has been talked about, but do y'all feel like East Coast pools are much harder than West Coast pools? I'm sure y'all have heard about this discussion before, I think. Yeah, I hear about it all the time. Literally talk to any like mid-level player in the East Coast about like the West Coast versus East Coast. They'll all talk about how much better East Coast is than the West Coast. It's nonstop, dude. I'm sick of it. Every East Coast player thinks they're so good, and maybe to an extent they are, but like I don't know. I just think like there's something funny about like the 80th best player in a region thinking that they would be like top 40 in the West Coast, and it's like at one point like what does that even mean, like
I've said this for so long. Like, I think that for a very long time there was the idea that like West Coast was like this to East Coast, West Coast felt like there was like this region of people who like was talking themselves up so much. And I feel like every like solid player in the East Coast who was like mid PR in the region would be like, oh yeah, I'd be PR in SoCal if I was there. But it's
yeah,
like
it's
they
like
had no way to
no.
prove it ever. And now they're finally being able to go to rollback tournaments and enter. And a lot of the good like West Coast players are not active and not entering. But because of that, a lot of the East Coast players are like, oh wow, yo, we're entering all these West Coast events and doing well. So, maybe East Coast is actually the best or something. And it's like, please just play the video game.
Yeah, I
It's
mean to be
oh my
fair, I do think East Coast is significantly more deep than the West Coast. I feel like that's very difficult to dispute. I just think like the discourse around this is typically led by players in the top 80 or like 90 of the East Coast. Like very solid players. I just feel like there's no like it's such a strange hill to die on, right?
it's
Like that
yeah. To I
and also
guess
to be honest, I think NorCal and SoCal have so many inactives that would be just as good. Like they just don't like I will say I don't think there's much of like I think the grinder net play culture is definitely more of a thing on the East Coast than it is the West Coast.
yeah. To like I guess directly answer Sika's question, do I think like the sixth seed of a East Coast pool is on average better than the sixth seed of the West Coast pool? Probably. But I think that like the top seeds of all of these pools are pretty comparable, and I would not say that in on average, like the East Coast pools are significantly harder than West Coast.
I think in one of the early projected brackets, I saw something ridiculous like Vankris versus Unsure and for Unsure's first match, and I thought like, wow, that is such a crazy round one match. Like I think if you went to a major, that would be like one of the later matches in round one pools, if not like a round two pool match or a wave two pool matchup.
Yeah, sure.
All right. I actually don't see any other questions in the chat right now, other than EdwinBudding, who's going to win Melee Stats, Melee Madness bracket, and why is it a bait SJ? I don't think it'll be a bait. I think Armada and Mango from Genesis is going to take it pretty solidly. It's kind of hard to top.
I like the question from Cypher115 that says, "Hey, DarkGenex, any new memes dropping soon?" To which I say, I literally tweeted something new like 5 hours ago. If you like Hatsune Miku, go click it.
Is that the one for being fired from your job as video editor?
That is in fact the one about being fired from my job as video editor.
Excellent. My
Speaking of social
sincerest
media, do you want to
apologies.
plug your socials? And it
Yeah,
is okay.
sure.
We'll
Yeah,
recover.
sure. Follow me at Edwin_Budding, or follow the Melee Stats Twitter account at Melee Stats Pod, where we basically do tweets reporting daily local results or local results from the night before. If you want to support great Melee journalism, go to patreon.com/Melee Stats. DarkGenex, you can talk about the benefits of being a great Melee Stats patron.
Sometimes, if they like you enough, you get to come on their podcast and talk about Melee.
Yeah, and that's
And
really
also
that's
you
really
get to
all
discuss
anyone wants.
Melee. It's really fun, just like being able to see the results. And if you want to see how your favorite players are doing or discuss the up and comers of your region or whatnot, the Melee Stats podcast is there for you.
All right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in tonight, and be sure to enjoy an awesome weekend of great Melee at Galint Open.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. Follow me on Twitter, DarkGenex. All right.